Welcome to the Happier and Healthier podcast. I'm your host, Maria Marlowe, and this is a place where we don't rely on good luck or good genes for our health and happiness, but rather we create it with our thoughts and our actions each and every single day. Each week, I'll bring you a thought or a guest that will help you live your happiest and healthiest life. Are you ready? Welcome back to the Happier and Healthier podcast. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Will Bulsiewicz, more commonly known as Dr. B. He is a gastroenterologist, gut health expert, and the author of the book Fiber Fueled, which was just released this week. Today, we're going to discuss his book and why plant-based foods are so important for our gut and overall health, and how we can optimize our microbiome for overall wellness. We're also giving away a copy of his book this week, so to enter, head over to my Instagram at Maria Marlowe, and Marlowe has a W-E at the end, to enter. Are you interested in cooking healthier at home, but don't know where to start? I'm here to help. If you want to learn how to make healthy food taste delicious at home, sign up for my brand new online cooking course, Healthy by Marlowe Cooking School. This completely digital program will teach you the skills you need to whip up flavorful, craveable, nutrition-packed meals, mostly in 25 minutes or less. You'll learn how to chop, sear, sauté, roast, and steam like a pro. Unlike most cooking courses, which focus solely on technique with no regards to health, in this cooking course, we'll focus on technique, nutrition, and flavor so that you and your family actually look forward to eating healthy food. By the end of this 4-week class, you'll feel more comfortable and confident in the kitchen and leave with more than a dozen easy recipes that you can alternate and repeat. You'll even learn how to whip up a nutritious, flavorful, craveable meal with whatever ingredients you have on hand. No recipe needed. To join, head to mariamarlowe.com/cooking-school and sign up today. If you're looking to improve your health, and especially if you want to improve your digestion, you have to check out the probiotic brand Hyperbiotics. It's the most effective probiotic that I've found on the market, and it's the brand that I personally use and recommend to all of my clients. It's so effective because it's made with 15 different strains of probiotics that have been scientifically shown to benefit digestive and overall health, including weight management, reproductive health, and mood. They're also clinically shown to be 15 times more effective than the common probiotic capsules that you'll find at the health food store. Hyperbiotics has helped many of my clients and myself get rid of bloating, increase regularity, and maintain a flat stomach and healthy digestion. For being so high quality, you expect them to be super expensive, but they're extremely affordable at just $25 for a 1-month supply. Plus, you get an additional 20% off with the code HYPERMARIA. Head to hyperbiotics.com, that's HYPERBIOTICS.com, and use the code HYPERMARIA for 20% off. If you're looking for all-natural skincare products without harsh chemicals, useless fillers, or other nasty things you don't want in your bloodstream, check out Primally Pure. It's a California-based skincare line that started from a farm, so you can bet that all the ingredients are all natural yet extremely effective. I love their beauty cream, fancy face serum, and deodorant. Head to primallypure.com and use code MARIA10 for 10% off your order. Dr. B, thanks so much for being here.
Maria, thank you for having me on the show. Happy and Healthier. It's pretty cool to be on with you. And, the internet kind of drives me crazy sometimes, but one of the beautiful things is that you're in Dubai and I am in Charleston, South Carolina, and we're able to connect and talk about all things gut health.
I know. And this is one of my favorite topics, and it's one of the most popular topics on the podcast as well. So I'm very excited to talk more about gut health with you. Let's start at the beginning. I know you have a book that just came out. It's called Fiber Fueled. Let's talk about fiber. What is the importance of fiber for our health?
All right. I like to take it from the top. And so let's start by erasing from our data bank, from our memory, the image of our grandmother stirring the orange drink so that she could poop. And let's talk about what fiber is, because it's been so vastly underrated. I think it's ridiculous. And that's why I had to write a book about it. Fiber is a part of plants. It's in all plants. All plants have fiber. And we have been, taught to count grams. Like, how many grams of fiber do you have in a day? Maria, I have no clue how many grams of fiber I eat in a day. And I honestly don't care, because we're going to get to some of the more important points during this episode of how you should be thinking about your fiber. But the key is that we have no clue, like millions of types of fiber, potentially billions. We honestly don't know. It's very hard for scientists to agree on how to even name fiber or define its chemical structure. So to keep it simple, we just kind of break it into two main categories, soluble and insoluble fiber. But not all fiber is the same. The fiber that you find in a piece of kale is not going to be the same fiber that you'll find in spinach. And it's not going to be the same fiber that you would find in quinoa. So all plants have fiber. All plants have unique blends of fiber. Different types of fiber do different things in the body. And what we want to talk about today is the way that fiber affects our gut, which is really the critical piece.
So I'm always interested, actually, let's take a step back even further. I'm always interested in how people get interested in their passion, right? And your passion is obviously, and your purpose is gut health and educating people about fiber and gut health. How did you get to this point?
Because I'm a normal human being who was susceptible to the same mistakes that any other person is. I mean, ignore for a moment my education and the fact that I'm a medical doctor, a gastroenterologist, and let's just talk about me, Will, the guy. And so I was a good athlete in high school. I come from a family who's always been skinny. I always thought that I could eat whatever I wanted and get away with it. And that was true for a long period of my life. And as I progressed through my 20s and approached 30, I was working my tail off. I was in my residency, 16-hour shifts, 6 days a week, not sleeping and eating on the go. And kind of eating whatever was available and easy and tasted good. And that basically meant a lot of fast food. And my health got away from me. I didn't like the way I felt. My energy levels were gone. I basically was like, I should have been sponsored by Red Bull, because I was like smashing those things 3 times a day, plus coffee a couple times. Gained weight. So I was up 50 pounds relative to what I weighed in high school, which is hard for a guy to stomach when you think of yourself as being an athlete. And it's hard to stomach when you have younger brothers that are calling you out on it. So like, I had this gut, and it was not a beer gut because I didn't have enough time to drink beer. It was a food gut. And had high blood pressure, had anxiety, honestly, like was accomplishing my professional goals, but feeling unwell in doing it. And something had to give. And, I thought that I could outwork it. I'm a hardworking person. That's just who I am. So I thought I could outwork it in the gym. And so I started going in the gym. So we're talking about, I'm in my early 30s at this point, and I am a single male in my early 30s. Like, I will do literally anything within my power to try to impress women at this point in my life. And so I'm in the gym for 30 to 45 minutes, lifting weights 6 times a week. And then after I'm done lifting weights, jumping on the treadmill for a 5 to 10K, or jumping in the pool for 50 to 100 laps if it's the summertime. And like, I could put on muscle mass, I couldn't lose the gut. And I never really connected that, like, this food that I ate my entire life. Like, it's not that I sat there and thought this food is healthy. I just never really connected that the food that I had consumed my entire life, that I could get away with it when I was younger, I couldn't get away with it anymore.
Well, I think there's also this idea, I remember when I was growing up, that you can outrun a bad diet. So that it doesn't matter what you eat, as long as you exercise and you burn off the equal amount of calories, you're fine, which is not actually the case.
Yeah. And I heard a lot of my friends when I was, this age, a lot of my friends would say, I work out so that I can eat what I want. But the problem is that philosophy wasn't working for me, and I couldn't get anywhere. And so what really changed things for me was that I met and started dating the person who is now my wife. And I had literally, Maria, never been around someone who was like even vegetarian. And my wife ate that way, and we would go on a date, and we'd be at this like beautiful restaurant, and you could get whatever you wanted. and I would be looking at the chops and the ribeyes and stuff. And she would get a plant plate, and she would ask the waiter, it's not on the menu, but could you have the chef put together a bunch of plants on a plate for me? And my wife could control her weight. She looked amazing. She was not working out the way that I was working out. So it really started the gears turning in my mind. I was like, what's the deal with this? And you got to understand, so there's this guy, the normal person. I'm a normal guy. I'm vulnerable to the same things that anyone else is. But I also have this education. I am a board certified gastroenterologist, board certified internist. I at one point considered myself an epidemiologist. I really was planning to be a clinical researcher. And then I met a point in my life where I had to make a choice, one or the other, clinical research or being in a room with patients taking care of them. And I had to do the patients. But my point is that I'm a scientist. I need the science to be there. If the science is not there, I'm not on board. And so when I saw this person I was dating eating this way, it opened up my mind to the possibility. But I was like, well, why haven't I heard about this? Why haven't I heard about this in med school or any of my training? And I started looking, and what I discovered shocked me. It wasn't a couple hundred studies. It was, more than 10,000. It wasn't bad research or wimpy research. It was really, really high quality research. And I found enough for me to believe that there was this path. I started making changes in my life, starting with simple stuff, super small stuff. I would drop the fast food for dinner and go home and make a big old smoothie, a big one. And when I did that, I instantly felt better. My energy levels were much higher. I could get more work done. I could be more focused. I started losing weight naturally. My hair was thicker. My nails were better. My skin looked healthier. I feel like I reversed aging. Over the following years, I was pescatarian for several years. I dropped about 35 pounds. And then I got to a place where I was one day, and I don't even have honestly a date for this because it wasn't something where I was marking a date or it wasn't some, come to Jesus moment or something. But I had this day where I was like, you know what, I'm just going to try and see what happens if I go all the way. And I dropped the dairy, the eggs, and the fish, and I lost another 15 pounds instantly, and I was back to my high school weight. And, here I am now. I'm a dad. I got 2 kids. My son is 3. My daughter is almost 6. And I am working super hard, but I feel younger. I feel more energetic. I think I look younger. I definitely have more people asking me in the clinic if I'm old enough to be a doctor. And it's I'm 40.
That's a nice compliment.
So I'll take it.
Yeah. That's incredible. And I love that because you have been on both sides, right? So you know what it feels like to feel unhealthy, even though as a doctor, you would think, okay, doctors know everything. They're the healthiest people. But unfortunately, in medical school, you're not really taught about nutrition and diet and what to eat. And because of the hectic hours and just the crazy schedule, you end up having a lot of unhealthy habits. I've heard this story a lot of times from a lot of doctors. So that's amazing that your wife is a wonderful person and introduced you to this plant-based lifestyle and was able to help you out and turn your health around. So that's amazing. So let's just dive into some gut health questions. What are some of the biggest misconceptions you think people have when it comes to gut health or the microbiome?
Oh, gosh. All right. So I started my Instagram account, the Gut Health MD, a few years ago and really led up to writing this book because I felt like what was being shared when it comes to gut health was not really evidence-based. And I get some of the ideas that are out there, and I get the idea of an intuitive approach where if you feel better when you do something, then you should continue to do that. I get that. But the problem is that we need to allow the science to be our compass at the end of the day. If there's no science, then okay, let's use the best information we have. But if the science is leading us one way, we have to follow it. And what I worry about the most, Maria, honestly, when it comes to gut health, is the idea, and this is something that I detail in Fiber Fueled, the book, quite a bit. I worry about the idea that if it makes your stomach hurt, it must be inflammation. And I see this a lot, and it's been kind of the prevailing theme of diets for the last 20 years. And I get the idea, like 20 years ago, we didn't really have the data. When the paleo diet rose up in the early 2000s, we didn't really have the data to understand why people were feeling the way that they did. And there are food sensitivities. I mean, there's no denying that, including with legumes and grains. The question is it inflammation? And the science would say otherwise. The science would say that it's not. It's not inflammation. It's sloppy digestion. It's sloppy processing. And so what I worry about is, let me say this, like, I have a feel for the way that you eat, Maria, and I think that you eat an incredibly healthy diet. And it's not just one size fits all, right? Yeah. And I think that a paleo diet, in many cases, is a healthier diet than a vegan diet when people are eating vegan junk food.
Yep.
Okay. But I think the part that I would love to have a conversation about, or that I worry about, is the restrictions and the eliminations. Go ahead. You're going to say something.
Yeah, no, this is a really interesting. First of all, I love having all different opinions on here. And so, for example, I just had Dr. Terry Walls on, who is healed herself from MS using paleo principles. And she was originally vegan, vegetarian, and felt that the way that she was eating may have contributed to certain nutrition deficiencies for her and may have contributed to her issue. Yeah. And I can tell you personally, I was actually vegan for a period of time, and I'm still very heavily plant-based. I mean, I eat probably 90% of what I eat is plant-based, cruciferous vegetables, dark leafy greens, like nutrition dense. I'm not eating like Oreos and French fries, that kind of stuff. I also had or have an autoimmune condition. And for me, I felt better adding in a little bit of high quality, organic, grass-fed meat and animal products. Not a ton. I think when people think of paleo diet, generally they're thinking, eating big slabs of meat all day long. And that couldn't be further from the truth for me anyway. Right. And then in terms of the elimination, like for me, gluten, talk about digestive issues, like instantaneously before I finish the bowl of cereal, I'd have to be in the bathroom, or dairy, same thing. I'm Italian. So I grew up eating milk and cheese on everything. And I love that stuff. So giving dairy up was like a sad period for me. But I felt so much better, and I had really bad acne. And that was one of the key things that I think contributed to clearing up my acne. So for me, I have those sensitivities. I know a lot of people have sensitivities. Well, talking of gut health, leaky gut, let's talk a little bit about that. Yeah. On a vegan diet, so I assume you're still eating obviously grains and beans and things like that, foods that tend to contribute to leaky gut. So let's talk a little bit about that. Why there's, cultures all over the world that do eat grains and that do eat beans, and they seem to be doing fine. But then there's a subset of people that they eat them and they have problems. So let's just unpack that a little bit.
Oh, totally. And thank you, by the way, for allowing me to have this conversation about this. And let me just say, first of all, I have great respect for Terry Walls. We have the same publisher for our books. And I think that there's different ways that you can approach diet. And my point, if you read my book, for the people who are listening at home, what you're going to find is that this is not trying to force you into a one-size-fits-all approach. This is about a personalized approach. And actually, Maria, you are eating exactly the way that I describe in the book, 90% plant-based. So I think the gluten issue we can unpack too, if you want to. There's some complexity there.
Yeah.
But let's start with ignoring the gluten for a moment. Let's talk about beans and whole grains. Okay. Sure. So that the blue zones, the 5 blue zones from around the world, are the, from what we can tell, the longest lived populations that exist. Now, they are not predominantly vegan. They are predominantly plant-based. And I think that the path to health is, particularly when I live in the United States and it's a country where the average person is 10% plant-based, I think the path is through plants. We can't be 10% plant-based and be healthy. I just don't see how that's possible. So when it comes to grains and legumes, let me start with legumes, beans, lentils, stuff like that. Okay. People feel unwell when they eat these foods sometimes. And I totally get it. I see it in my clinic every single day. I'm a gastroenterologist. This is what I'm taking care of. The person who feels unwell is not the person who has a fully healthy gut. The person who feels unwell is the person who's had damage to their gut. And the question is, and you described it as leaky gut, and that's a fair way to describe it. I would use the expression dysbiosis, which is essentially the same thing. A person who has dysbiosis has had damage to their gut. You see changes in the microbes, less good guys, more bad guys, loss of diversity. You see increased intestinal permeability, the leaky gut. All right, that's dysbiosis. And so when a person has dysbiosis, let's say they have irritable bowel syndrome, where almost 100% have food sensitivities. What happens when they eat the bean is that the bean is a very, very, very rich source of many different types of fiber and resistant starch. Now, the problem is that we as humans were not built to process fiber ourselves. If we were 100% sterile, which none of us are, if you were 100% sterile, you would not have the ability to unpack and digest fiber. We outsourced it to our microbes. We outsourced it. And the reason why is because if we think about human evolution and sort of human history, we fanned out from Africa to different parts of the world. There is no one-size-fits-all ancestral diet either. Wherever people lived, they ate off the land. And it had to be whatever was available within their ecosystem. They were living in famine. So you needed a gut that was adaptable to all the different types of plants that exist on this planet. How many plants are there that are edible? We think 300,000. 300,000. So you can't have a gut that's just good at processing, 50 of them like we have in the United States. You need something that could adapt. So there are these enzymes. By the way, I apologize for being a science nerd here. I'm going a little bit nerdy.
No, we love this stuff. So please be a science nerd.
So there are these enzymes called glycoside hydrolases, all right? And that's what we use to unpack our carbohydrates, like fiber. And we big, strong humans have 17 of them total. And you could take a single cellular bacteria and it could have over 200 of them. There are estimates that our microbiome has 60,000 unique enzymes to unpack our fiber. And that goes back to what I said in the beginning. Every type of fiber is different, and we don't know how many types there are. There's tons. When you damage the gut, you lose diversity in the gut. When you lose diversity in the gut, who knows where you go from 60,000, but it's not going up, it's going down. You're losing the enzymes that you need in order to process and digest your food. And what you result in is people who test themselves with the higher fiber foods or the higher FODMAP foods are the people who struggle to process and digest the food. And that's what you see happening when they consume a legume. So when they do the studies looking at the effect of legumes on the microbiome, I understand there's these conversations about lectins and stuff like that. I want your listeners to realize that there is a hierarchy to research. The hierarchy is that at the bottom are test tube studies. That's the weakest quality research that we have. We actually consider that less than a single human anecdote, like your uncle saying that they drank a 12-pack every day and still lived to 90, right? Test tube research is the lowest research. Animal research is just above that. The highest quality research is a systematic review and meta-analysis, where you're compiling data from multiple studies. Systematic reviews and meta-analyses of legumes consistently show that they are beneficial to us as humans, that people live longer. There was one study where they took a number of different plant foods, and when they analyzed it and they controlled for confounding factors, there was only one food that jumped out as being promoting longevity. That was legumes. And it verifies what you see in the blue zones populations. They all eat legumes. But do legumes actually damage our gut and cause inflammation? As I lay out in the book in more detail than what we can get into in this podcast, the answer is no. The answer is no. It actually shows that the gut is becoming healthier when you consume legumes. But the problem is this. This is how I want everyone to think about the gut, okay? The gut is a muscle. The gut is a muscle. What that means is it can get stronger. What that also means is it has a breaking point. So if you go to the gym and you lift 3 times what you normally lift, what are you going to do? You're going to hurt yourself. If you have an injured gut that struggles with legumes and you go and you do the 4-bean chili, you're going to hurt yourself. And it's not that you're actually inducing dysbiosis or you're inducing leaky gut. It's that you have dysbiosis, you have leaky gut. And as a result of that, you struggle to process this food. And so it hurts. But if you go to the gym with the right amount of weight, which in some cases, after you've had an injury, is a rehab level of weight. It's not like trying to show off at the beach. It's more like you're grabbing 2.5 pounds. That's the way that you need to approach this. If you have damage to your gut, you need to introduce legumes in a slow way and increase slowly over time. And your gut will adapt to it. But if you overdo it all at once because of the damage to your gut, you're going to struggle with it and you're going to feel you're going to get those feelings that no one likes.
Yeah.
Dysbiosis.
Well, my question for you is, I grew up in New York, Italian American family, eating a very standard American diet. I was eating a ton of fast food, no vegetables. I probably had actually an exceptionally bad standard American diet. And just in talking with people, whether it's clients, friends, family, and even doctors on this podcast, I feel like in the US, there are so many things in our daily life that are working against our gut. Growing up, I was on, I don't know how many rounds of antibiotics for every cold flu virus that I was, ever had. The water is chlorinated. Stress. Everyone is super, super stressed, and we know that can negatively affect the gut. There's just sugar, refined carbohydrates, junk food, all this stuff. So how do we get ahead of that? Do you know what I'm saying? Like it just
Yep.
seems like everything's working against our gut.
Yeah.
And I'll give you another example. So my husband is Indian, and his grandfather is such an amazing man, grew up in India, still lives in India. And this guy can eat anything, drink anything. He's got an iron stomach. He's completely fine. Whereas his grandson, my husband, or me, growing up in a more Western society, we have to be extremely careful what we're eating because like our gut is not as strong as his is. Because again, we grew up with very different sterile environments and all of this stuff. So how do we get ahead of that?
So I think that you bring up a lot of great points. Okay. One is a generational difference. And there actually are studies that you can't do this study in a human because it takes us too long to look at what happens over the course of, 3 generations of humans, right? But they do these studies in mice where they look at the microbiome that changes over time. And there's this guy, Peter Turnbaugh, who's one of the top microbiome researchers on the planet. And what he showed is that if you take a mouse and you put it on a low fiber diet, and it starts off with, let's just give it a number to make it simple, 1,000 species. Okay. So grandma has 1,000 species, but you put her on a low fiber diet. By the time she has mom, she's down to 700 species. So mom inherits 700. And then mom's on a low fiber diet. And by the time mom has you, she's down to 400 species. You starting off at a 60% deficit compared to your relative from 2 generations ago. In this study, if they reintroduced fiber early enough, that entire process was reversible. And so what that means is that some of the issues that you struggle with now, if we can get you back on the right types of fiber, we can reverse that issue. It's not that you're permanently lost. Okay. But you're bringing up a lot of great points, Maria, about our lifestyle. So let's go beyond the food. Let's go beyond the fork for a moment and talk about some of these things. So you mentioned some of them, stress. Stress damages the gut. Stress induces dysbiosis by itself. Some of the most challenging patients that I take care of are people with trauma or people with an eating disorder. Both of those things severely affect the gut. And when I take care of those patients, I know in order for me to get them better, we have to address those underlying issues or they're just not going to get better. Sleep. There are studies that literally changing your sleep by 30 minutes per night can have detrimental effects on your health. And the reason why is it affects your gut. When I was that guy who was in his late 20s and not sleeping, I was what science has proven in the sense that sleep deprivation changes your gut in a way that makes it resemble a person who is obese. You crave carbs, you crave fast food. That's the guy that I was. That's why I put on 50 pounds. Circadian biology. So like our biorhythm, we will eat dinner at 11 o'clock at night sometimes, or we do late night snacks. Every single living creature on our planet has a biorhythm. And that includes the microbes in our gut, of which there's 39 trillion. And if you take the exact same meal, Maria, and you feed it to a person at breakfast, or you feed it to them late in the day, it could be literally the exact same meal with no difference. You will have a different biologic effect. And they will have higher sugar spike, higher blood glucose levels later in the day. And it has to do with their circadian biology. Blue light throws off melatonin. So looking at your phone, looking at your TV, looking at your computer late at night, is not only affecting your sleep, it's affecting your gut. Absence of exercise. I mean, I don't think I need to cover like how sedentary we are relative to what we were 100 years ago when cars didn't exist, and then just like our sterile environment. We have built these human edifices thinking that it's provided us with safety. And it's like a microbial badlands. It's like completely devoid of microbes, and we're spraying it with chemicals, and I think this is even more applicable right now with COVID-19, where we're trying to be as clean as we can. But there's a consequence that we pay. That's the flip side, which is destroying our microbes. And then, coming back to our food just for a moment, 60% of the American diet is processed food. Whether it's my diet or it's your diet, which, I mean, honestly, we're effectively on the same page, but those foods contain preservatives that didn't exist 100 years ago. Our grandparents didn't grow up eating those foods. We did. And how do you create a food that can sit in a box on the shelf and not change for months on end? People need to understand that the breakdown of our food is done by bacteria. And so if you have cold cuts that sit in a refrigerator for 6 months and you slice off a couple pieces every, once in a while, the reason why it doesn't rot is because it's killing bacteria. The bacteria can't get to it. And so what do you think happens when you take that food that's designed to destroy bacteria and you drop it in with 39 trillion microbes that are focused and centered in your colon? So you see all of these things, and how do we correct that? This is where I actually think that a lot of the concepts are like the core philosophy of the Paleolithic diet. There's a lot to love there. There's a lot to love, which is that there needs to be a return to centering ourselves in a way that is human biology. And that means like actually getting a good night's rest, going to bed early, getting your 8 hours of sleep, having dinner early, ideally, and then not eating any food after dinner, like water fasting from that point forward. I'm a believer in water fasting into the next morning and extending it a little bit. Getting our routine exercise in, ideally exercising outside, spending time in nature, potentially planting a garden, and then returning to food that is natural.
And what about a lot of people turn to supplements like probiotics and prebiotic fiber? People are adding to smoothies. So what are your thoughts on that? Do we need those to repair the gut, or do you think primarily through the diet is enough?
Let me start here and say that I think that there is a hierarchy. And you can't take a C- gut and turn it into an A+ with a supplement. It's not possible. All right. If your diet is not in line, then you're not going to get there. And so from a dietary perspective, there's one key philosophy. I said in the beginning, it's not about grams of fiber. Let me tell you what it is about. In the biggest study to date to connect our diet and lifestyle to the health of our gut, which is called the American Gut Project, when they performed their analysis, there was one thing that jumped out as the clear-cut number one predictor of a healthy gut microbiome. This one thing. And that was the diversity of plants in your diet. When you have a wide, broad mix of plants, you get a wide, broad mix of fiber that supports a wide, broad mix of microbes. Diversity in your plant diet translates into diversity in your microbiome, and that is a measure of health. So if you're not doing that, you can't reverse your gut with a fiber supplement or a probiotic by itself. But with that being said, in my gastroenterology practice, when I'm taking care of patients, I mean, almost all of them are put onto a prebiotic supplement, like almost 100%. I actually take a prebiotic myself. What is a prebiotic? It's basically just concentrated fiber, concentrated soluble fiber that has been demonstrated in studies to feed and nourish the healthy microbes inside of us. A probiotic is the living bacteria that we've heard about. And, I could break down probiotics in far more detail, but I think the bottom line, just to shorten it, is to say that they do have value and benefit to some patients. It's not that I'm opposed, but right now there's more hype than science. You shouldn't believe that the probiotic is going to radically transform your health. It may give you some benefit, and it'll only give you benefit for the time that you're taking it. And then the minute you stop, that benefit is gone. So at the end of the day, to me, you have to make that dietary adjustment. I really think that the core philosophy needs to be about diversity of plants within your diet, starting to get that ramped up, and then to get you there, there is benefit to potentially prebiotics and probiotics.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to any sort of supplement, there's always a wide range in terms of what's actually in the supplement, which strains of bacteria or probiotics are in there. I feel like that also adds to the complexity and sometimes confusion because someone might be like, oh, I took a probiotic and it didn't work, but maybe the one that you took wasn't great or wasn't great for you. So I think it's always, we can't do what our sister's doing, our best friend's doing, what they say on the news. We need to figure out what works best for our individual body.
Because it comes back to bioindividuality. So you have a completely unique microbiome. There's literally no one on the planet that has a microbiome like you. It's like your fingerprint. And when you take a probiotic, what you're doing is you're taking a generic formula that is being applied just universally to everyone. When you take that generic formula, the hope is that those bacteria will drop down into your colon and lead to good biochemistry, which gives you a health benefit. And you'll know if you feel better and you feel different. And when people feel better and they feel different, then to me, if you're comfortable with the cost, then it's worth it. But if you don't notice a difference, then that probiotic is not for you. And it doesn't mean that all probiotics are a failure. It just means that particular one is just not working with your biochemistry.
Exactly. So you keep mentioning the diversity of plant-based foods. So I'm curious, how do you, in your daily life, how are you making sure you're getting that wide diversity? Because sometimes I feel like in the grocery store, I see the same 50 vegetables and fruit, and that's why I love to shop at the farmer's market. But I'm curious, how do you incorporate that variety?
So let me ask you a question. I'm just curious, not to turn the tables, but just give me whatever number comes to mind. How many different plants do you think you consume on a weekly basis? And herbs count if they're fresh.
Oh, I would say.
And you're 90% plant-based, so you are a predominantly a plant-based person.
Yeah, I would say at least 30.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. And that was actually, in the study, that was the threshold, was if you got more than 30. You have to understand a little bit of the statistics of it that, more would still be better. 35 is better than 30. Okay. But 30 is fantastic. Okay. They have studied native tribal people in Tanzania. They're called the Hadza. They are one of the few modern day hunters and gatherers that exist. They don't have organized agriculture. They just live off the land. And what they have found is quite fascinating. I said diversity is the key of your microbiome, meaning when you have more diversity, it's a healthier microbiome. When they look at an American's microbiome, we have 40% less diversity than they do. And they ask the question, so what are they eating? And they are not vegan. They're hunters and gatherers. But they are eating more than 100 grams of fiber per day. And when they look at the diversity of plants in their diet, because they're foraging and they're not just eating whatever the same routine, iceberg lettuce with a tomato cut 4 ways and blue cheese dressing on top, which, by the way, was my favorite salad back in the day. They are eating literally 600 varieties of plants.
Wow.
And most Americans are less than 30. Most Americans are more on the 10 to 20 range. So to answer your question, how do I get more diversity in my diet? It's very simple. It's a core foundational philosophy for me. All right. I'm not thinking about superfoods. I'm happy to talk about superfoods and how they weigh in, but I'm thinking about diversity. So when I go to the salad bar, to me, if it's a plant, it goes on my salad. It's just a question of how much. When I go to the supermarket, diversity of plants. When I make recipes at home, can I spice this up with more plants? So a simple meal that we have. We're not cooking, we're a normal family. We are not cooking lavish gourmet meals that are from forks over knives. We do sometimes, but most nights it's the routine stuff. And so we'll have a penne. It'll be an organic whole wheat penne for us, and add tomato sauce. And you could end it at that. And that would be diversity of 2. Or you can add onions, garlic, mushrooms. You're Italian, so I imagine you probably like this kind of stuff.
I put garlic on everything.
Garlic on everything, onions, mushrooms, throw some squash or zucchini in there, throw some fresh parsley on top, right? And now all of a sudden you've gone from diversity of 2 up to diversity of 7 or 8. and it's even more delicious.
Yeah.
So it's just having that simple approach of saying, when I have a chance to add more, I do.
Yeah. No, that's great. And I love adding fresh herbs. When you put it that way, I can see how it's actually quite easy to get diversity. Luckily, here in Dubai, there's this incredible farm here started by a woman who wanted more organic produce here. And she grows over 140 different heirloom varieties of
Oh,
vegetables.
wow.
So I feel like the luckiest person to be able to order it online and it's delivered right to my house. And every week I could have a different type of tomato and a different type of cucumber. And so if you guys have a farmer's market nearby, I definitely recommend shopping your farmer's market because there you can find these heirloom varieties, which are typically more flavorful even than the stuff that you'll get at the grocery store.
Well, because there's been such pressure, and this is one of the things I talk about a little bit in the book, is there's been such pressure on the farmers to conform. And so they are being forced to choose the varietals that produce more at a lower cost.
And that are heavy, that are water dense, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of it's sold by the pound. So what happens is they grow these massive cucumbers that are huge and it costs you $2 a cucumber, but it has no flavor because all the water just basically dispersed the flavor of it.
100%. And then the other issue is concerns. I mean, I'm sure you share these same concerns with the soil.
Yeah.
So, soil is like a marker of human health. Maybe people don't think of that, but like the soil prepares our food supply, and you can only be as healthy as your food supply. And I worry, this is where I get worried about glyphosate and Roundup, which is that some of the claims with glyphosate maybe go a little bit too far beyond what the science is literally showing us. But I will stand here and tell you that by everything that I've seen, there's no way that glyphosate is good for your gut. It's just a question of how bad. And I am highly confident that it's not good for our soil, and we're dropping it by the ton. And so I really hope that, like, when we come out of COVID-19 phase, I really hope people wake up and understand that, we can all have our conspiracy theories, and they're kind of fun and entertaining sometimes to talk about. But at the end of the day, what this really boiled down to is we've been lashing this planet. We've been lashing this planet, and we got 7 billion people. And, it was 2 billion in 1900, and it was 1 billion in 1800, and it's going to be 10 billion in 30 years. And we're pushing it to the brink. And this is the kind of thing that happens when you push it too far.
Yeah. We can just hope everyone wakes up. I think now everyone realizes also just how interconnected everything is, from our health to just the different countries, like the entire planet, like everything is connected.
Yeah.
Even there's just no way around it. So I think hopefully people will start to think about these things like the environment and the chemicals that we're spraying and all of these things a little bit more deeply.
Yeah, and it's so interesting to think about. Like, for example, think about ecosystems. So, I mean, we could talk all day about this kind of stuff. I'm like nerding out here, but think about the Amazon rainforest and what we've seen happening to that, right? And it's kind of depressing to know, like, the loss of species that exists. And what is a measure of health within the Amazon rainforest? It's actually the diversity of species. Right. So there's this balance that exists. And I don't love mosquitoes or snakes. Actually, I'm like terrified of snakes. But I don't want them gone because they serve a purpose. And when you remove things from the ecosystem, that's when failure occurs. And that is literally the exact same thing that happens in your gut. Your gut is an ecosystem too. And diversity of species is the same rule of the land. Whatever ecosystem you're talking about, whether it's your gut on a small scale, or it's like the Amazon rainforest on large scale, diversity of the species becomes key and leads to balance and strength.
Yeah. So I'd love to switch gears a little bit and ask a question that I feel like as a gastroenterologist, you probably talk about this kind of stuff all day long.
Yeah.
But let's talk about poop for a second. I think it's something,
gosh, my favorite topic.
Yeah, but nobody wants to ask or talk about this in public, but I feel like we need to talk about it because you can tell a lot from your poop. So can you share, like, when should people be concerned? Like, how can you use it as a diagnostic tool to kind of figure out what's going on and maybe what you need to do to remedy it? For example, I mean, you can kind of even see whether you have enough fiber or not, right?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, no, it's a fascinating topic, and I'm kind of I don't want to admit this in front of my mother-in-law, but I'm kind of obsessed with this. So I feel like poop should be a vital sign. And like, I'm not exaggerating. Temperature,
I
heart
agree with
rate,
you.
respiratory rate, blood pressure, and then like, what's going on with your poop? All right. And for the listeners at home, you can pull this up. Okay. Now, I feel bad for the person whose name is attached to this, but there's this thing called the Bristol Stool Scale. Have you ever heard of that?
Of course, yes.
Yeah.
I
All
love
right.
that thing.
Yeah, nice. So, and the Bristol Stool Scale actually gives you visual images of different types of poop. And there's 7 different types, with 4 being completely normal. And, there are ones that are specific to constipation. There's ones that are specific to diarrhea. I actually think that's quite helpful to understand what's going on with your body, that we should normally be having a sausage-shaped, soft but formed bowel movement. And that's what a type 4 is. And when you have a lumpy, bumpy stool, or when you have to strain to have the little turd, those are signs of constipation. And that, to me, is information that I'm searching for when I see my patients as a GI doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And the same is true with a loose stool or a cow pie or any of those types of things. Okay. I also look at stool frequency. So the form is probably the most helpful thing, but the frequency is important too. And, what we hear is that there's this normal range, with normal being 1 bowel movement per day. Maria, we have normalized abnormal. We're saying 1 bowel movement a day is normal, but that's never been normal in human history until us. So that may be the average for us. But, if we were consuming fiber the way that the Hadza are in Tanzania, 100 grams of fiber per day, you would have 3 bowel movements a day, because you would have a bowel movement every time that you ate. And those bowel movements are reflective of the health of your microbiome. 60% of the weight of your stool is from your microbes. So it is not like the excrement or the waste that's left over from your food. Most of the weight is the microbes. And if you take soluble fiber, which is the prebiotic kind, prebiotic is the kind that feeds the microbes. If you take soluble fiber, it actually dissolves completely. There's no grit, right? So you can't make an argument that like, it literally is like, it can be just like regular water. You can't make an argument that is like the roughage that's making your poop big. It's not. But you can try this experiment at home. If you take soluble fiber, you will find that you will have a larger bowel movement. Why? Because you have just promoted the growth of bacteria in your colon. And that's a good thing. And that leads to a bigger bowel movement. So I think, and there's so many other things that we could talk about. It's kind of interesting. I actually have a course that I'm beta testing right now. And it's going to be like a full launch probably this summer, depending on when we get to actually do the videos. But in my beta testing, I'm in my 2nd round of beta testing it. And this is one of the lectures that people have enjoyed the most, is what does your poo say about you?
Yeah, I bet, because it's really interesting, and it does give you so much information that you can work with, right? So if you see it's the 1 or 2 on the chart, or you're constipated, okay, I'm constipated. Here are a couple of things that I can do. I could have more water. I could have more fiber. I could do this. I could do that. And same thing on the other side. So you can use it to figure out, to experiment and to figure out how to fix it.
Yeah, 100%. And that's one of the critical pieces as a GI doctor when I see my patients, for sure.
Yeah. And I'd love to ask you about parasites. Is that something that you see often in your practice? Because I feel like sort of in this holistic wellness world, we hear a lot about parasites. So I'm just curious, in your practice, do you see that with some frequency? And how would people know, or when they should go check for that?
So I don't see a lot of parasites. I run a lot of tests looking for parasites. They can be hard to diagnose, to be fair. And there are certain types of parasites. Parasites come of a wide variety. And some of them are completely terrifying. And some of them are, honestly could be thought of as very much on the spectrum of bacteria. But I don't see a ton of them in my practice with the testing that we use. I do occasionally come across them. I'm testing for them all the time. But I think that it's within reason to be looking for these things. But I do want people to know one thing. There's a harmony and a balance that exists in the gut. And when we disrupt that harmony and balance, sometimes we have undue consequences. And what I worry about is when we try to destroy things. Strategies to destroy microbes like bacteria oftentimes lead to people having worsening gut issues. You may feel better short term and you get worse in the long term. When it comes to parasites, I would want to make sure that there's a good reason that we're trying to do the treatment. And part of the reason that I would say that is, it's easy to sort of vilify them and make it sound like all parasites are bad. There's actually treatment that's been done, Crohn's disease, using worms. You can actually treat Crohn's disease with worms. And
Wow.
Why? Because the worm is not necessarily trying to kill you. The worm is actually contributing to a balance that exists in our microbiome. Our microbiome has bacteria, fungi, parasites, archaea, and viruses. And they all live in harmony. And sometimes they're meant to be there. And so I guess the broader point that I would like to make on this topic is that the way that we win with our gut is by empowering the good guys. I don't really think that our best strategy is typically to try to destroy the bad guys.
Yeah, well said. Well, this has been very, very insightful. So much amazing information. I'd love to ask you one last question. If there's just one tip you can leave our listeners with on how they can live a happier and healthier life, what would that be?
I think you probably know where I'm going here. And that is that I truly believe, and I talk about it in my book, Fiber Fueled, that one of the main things that we're missing is this concept of diversity of plants. And the book is very much about meeting you where you are. So I'm not trying to turn you into 100% plant-based if that's not what's right for you. But what I am trying to do is show you the science-based approach to optimizing your gut microbiome and making this a part of your dietary philosophy, no matter what diet you follow. Diversity of plants, no matter who you are, you can do this. You can do this and you will reap the reward as a result of that.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Dr. B. And for more from Dr. B, you can head to theplantfedgut.com. And of course, you can check out his book. You can find the book wherever books are sold. It's called Fiber Fueled. And if you head over to my Instagram at Maria Marlowe, we're doing a book giveaway this week. Well, thank you so much for being here, Dr. B.
Maria, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure hanging out. And, honestly, we can keep talking forever, I'm sure. But thank you for everyone listening and hanging out with us.